Coming to you with another reading. I should have done this a little earlier, but of course, you know what I was doing, running around with this bad back, dragging it. So I'm going to keep riding this body till the wheels come off. You know what the Gnostics say about the body, it's just really a trap and a prison anyway. We're coming to you from the PDM, or with the PDM. We're reading, we're dealing with personality. I like these videos because we have to get our minds right, as we used to say back in the day. Get your mind right. Okay, get some water. Clinicians whose descriptions of patients were studied by the Shedler-Weston Assessment Procedure, SWAP, a method for quantifying subtle and sophisticated clinical observations and inferences. There we go. Have to turn my volume up on that. They comment on the extremity and rawness of their clients' emotions, and also on their excessive use of defenses that some theorists and researchers have labeled primitive or immature. That is, defenses that are more distorted than those most frequently used by neurotic level people. The most commonly noted of such defenses are splitting or projective identification. Splitting is the tendency to see self and others in moralized all good and all bad categories, i.e., in unrealistically positive ways as saints, heroes, or rescuers, or in unrealistically negative ways as hateful villains or abusers, or in both in oscillating fashion. Projective identification involves failing to recognize troubling aspects of one's personality or one's own personality, but failing absolutely certain that another person, ergo the therapist, has those undesirable qualities and treating that person accordingly, eventually evoking from the other person the attitudes that have been projected with such conviction. See, I deal in concepts. Either you're conceptually just or you're conceptually unjust, but I also do know within the injustice area, there's shades, but it's all injustice. And sometimes you bend to injustice just to make it through the day. Sometimes you bend to injustice for comfort. Sometimes you bend to injustice for material gain. And some of the injustice could be pointed at you. And even, when you see people like those, like people who work and get mistreated on the job, but they keep it because it pays a little more than any other job would pay them. This happens a lot, and I'm sure, it happens in the Black community, so I'm sure it happens in any community that's lower on the social hierarchy. Those people you leave alone. But I tend to like people who are on the justice side, at least somewhere. It's just easy to get along with them. But I would never mistreat anyone that's not. I mean, just the human range is wide. In contrast to the benign physicianly, I don't know why that word threw me. In contrast to the benign, physicianly attitude that patients with neurotic level personality disorders tend to elicit in therapists and interviewers, patients at the borderline end of the continuum evoke strong feelings that clinicians may have to struggle to manage or contain. Often, these are negative feelings such as hostility, fear, confusion, helplessness, or boredom. However, powerful rescue fantasies and wishes to cure the patient by love are also common. Patients with severe personality disorders tend to evoke strong tendencies in the therapist to act, not just sit there. To put it more bluntly, clinicians may find themselves wanting to kill these patients or else to cross professional boundaries to save them. Oh, that happens. You already know if you've been watching me. I look at people sometimes and be like, nobody will miss that person if they're gone. But let's move on. Patients at the most disturbed end of the borderline range, especially in periods of intense reactivity, may confuse the therapist into regarding them as psychotic. Some patients who have never had a diagnosed psychotic illness may nonetheless have transient psychotic features such as concrete or overgeneralized thinking, pervasive and severe annihilation anxiety, and the unshakable conviction that their own attributes about someone are correct, regardless of anything the other person may say or do. People with the most severe personality disorders may impute their own thoughts and feelings to others, become convinced of the rightness of their most erroneous perceptions, and be ready to act on the basis of such convictions. An example of a person at this end of the borderline continuum would be a man who stalks his love object in the conviction that this person really loves him despite all the protestations to the contrary. Other patients with severely borderline psychologies report hearing voices, but unlike truly psychotic individuals, tend to identify such voices as internal rather than external, and often as recognizable. The voice of an angry parent, for example. The one thing I do with people is try to get them to explain. I never put my thoughts on people, or I never assume that people know anything. In this society, you have to ask, what do you know? What do you think? Okay, what does that mean to you? To see where people are coming from, because you just don't know. People have such really weird ideas. That's why I like being a conceptualist. I know the concepts, and I stick to that, and I use that to dictate and keep my connection to reality, to objective reality. All this crazy nonsense about everybody's got their own personal truth and their own personal reality, I let those people go on the insane side. And a lot of times when people have problems that I see, it comes from that. They're living in their own special bubbles and trying to live reality in the bubble. It doesn't make any sense. It would be like you leave your house and you build a shed in the middle of the park. Could be the nicest shed, or it could even be in your backyard. It could be the nicest shed in the world. And then you try to cut on lights, and you're not connected to no electrical grid. You're not even plugged up to the street light. You have nothing. But you try to turn on lights, and you try to turn on water. You have no sink in your house, or the sink is there, but it's not hooked up to any pipes. It's not hooked up to any hose. It's not hooked up to nothing. And you try to run water, and you try to flick on lights. And you have people who are deluded who might say, yeah, I just flicked on the light. It's bright in here. Then they're really gone. All right, back to the reading. Although some theorists have posited a psychotic level of personality organization, we feel that this formulation may create a confusion of terminology between such illnesses as schizophrenia or borderline schizophrenia as described by Blatt and Albach, 1988. A lot of citation in these books. There's a lot of studies. And the personality disorders described here. There is considerable clinical writing endorsing such a hypothesis, but as yet, little research supporting it, with the arguable exception of some cross-cultural and clinical investigations into psychotic states and histrionic personalities that are clearly neither schizophrenia nor psychotic mood disorders. There are numerous anecdotal and autobiographical accounts of individuals without severe mania, depression, or schizophrenia who, under stress, have had brief psychotic episodes or whose reality testing fails in certain areas. But whether this can be interpreted as a psychotic level personality organization is uncertain. The diagnostic picture is complicated by the fact that some people who become psychotic have had a pre-existing personality disorder, typically after receiving medication that reduces their psychotic symptoms. Such individuals then manifest a diagnosable disorder of personality. So, I'll go into the next section another time because we'll come back to the PDM. I think I'm going to do Vine Deloria Jr. next week. And, oh no, I'll do this Sunday, but it'll probably be behind a paywall. If you're new, because I was really using this channel for something else, but I've been getting more members, more subscribers. I still don't have enough to monetize, but if you're new to this channel, the reason why I read from these books instead of putting the words up and read along is because I think it's important to see black men reading, actually doing it. And I know if I have words up, I am reading it too, but to see a person with a book reading. And I learned this doing story time at a school in South Carolina. And I would substitute in the schools when I was finishing up my degree. And I was substituting in they called them media centers in the library. They were starting to switch to media centers. And the children came down for story time, and the woman I was substituting for, I can't remember if she did story time, but the woman who was running the library told me to do it. And I said, "You sure you want me to?" Okay, I did it. And I held the book out and I read upside down so that the children could always be looking at the pictures to make it more like, not like a film, but I guess like comic bookish in a way. Instead of reading and showing them the picture, I had the picture open and then I was reading, but I was reading upside down and reading to them. Turn the page, read to them. And the children loved it, wanted me to come back. I said, I don't know, if the main teacher might be, I forget the woman's name, but I was saying her name, and little girls always help. You would help me out in the lower grades. Oh, we want you to come back, we want you to come back. Little black girls are always forceful and strong. And while I was reading, there was some black kids, some black boys especially, they were just looking like, with this look on their face, and I couldn't tell. I said, I can tell they're paying attention, but they looked like it was strange. And so when all the children left, the black woman who ran the library, she said, you're the first black man they've ever seen read a book. And I said, that's why they were looking at me like that. And it was amazing. It just knocked me for a loop. But once she said it, I said, yeah, you're right. When do people see black men reading? And so I read. I like to read. I like it to be on camera that I'm reading. Sometimes I might misspell things. Sometimes I might mispronounce things, but that's okay, because that's part of reading. And I want people to see it, that we read. We study, right? I'm not going to lie to you. This is the United States. And we're an oppressed group in the United States, so it's not a lot of us anymore. But we do read and we do study. But documentaries have taken over and audiobooks have taken over. So I'm pretty sure if we're talking about the black community and we're talking about Tubman's babies, I like to call us Tubman's babies, to go back to slavery in the United States, you're talking less than 1% that actually reads. And if you don't believe me and you're black or you're white or you're Spanish, you got black friends, ask your black friend. Maybe not ask them what's the last thing they read, but ask them, hey, this guy, he said that, black people don't really read a lot and probably less than 1%. And is that true? And if they're going to be honest with you, they'll tell you, yeah. And then if you want to really push it, you could push them and say, yeah, like who? Like, what's the last thing you read? Or don't tell them that you know me. Just say, hey, I was reading this book, man, this thing. Or this is better yet. You have a black friend, say, hey, I was thinking about starting a book club. What's the last thing you read? What would you like to read? And see what they say. That's a good way. And if you're just black, you know I'm telling the truth. If you got friends and family, you know. And it's fine. I mean, it's the United States. Hardly anybody reads in this country. It's actually a non-literate country in a sense. So much so that I heard that they're taking the essay out as a form of assessment. So school children are not going to be writing essays, and I guess before we wrote the essays, what were the compositions anymore? That's not going to be the assessment. I don't know what they're going to use. I don't know what English teachers are going to do. Maybe this. I don't know. Maybe they'll get to make the children get up and explain in front of class, or based on class participation and comprehension, the teacher will have to say if the person understands it or not. I think they're getting rid of standardized exams too, because the Asians were kicking white people's ass in the standardized exams. So now standardized exams don't matter. So that's where we are. Now, I don't know. There's no standard, but there was a standard and people still weren't doing it. So I don't know what's going to happen. This may make people come to it more, because then they're not saying, oh, I got to read all that, and being discouraged beforehand, or not. I'm not sure. But we'll see. If I live long enough, we'll see. Oh, man, my shoulder's bad. My back is bad. It's rough out here. If you want to support the podcast, you know what to do. You click the links, give directly, or become a sponsor. Until next time, please take care. Be safe. There's this weird virus, flu virus going around. It's knocking people out. So be safe and be careful. All right.